Test. I got to look all nice, so. I'll just let people talk for 45 minutes and, this will go great. Most people do ignore me. That's just my lot in life, you know. My parents, they forgot that I was there, and that's why Talcy and Mandy came along. They were like, oh, that's right. We already had one. So, hey, maybe. You never know. Ooh. Start spreading the gossip, and, everyone goes, ooh, I want to hear that. So, good evening. So Dad emailed out today to myself and Bill and said, hey, can one of y'all teach the class this evening? Because I'm not feeling so great. And they all said, oh, no. Sorry, you got to deal with me. But remember this, I might let you go early. So, So see, I'll get some cheers for that. No, so just to kind of let y'all be informed a little bit. Dad's had some fluid on his lungs. They've drained it a couple of times. He's going to see a pulmonologist tomorrow and a cardiologist Friday to kind of get things checked out. It does not appear to be anything just so major. Am I saying that right, Mandy? Okay. I was about to say, she knows what I know, but she also knows his doctor. So, but if you would just keep him in your prayers, my mother in your prayers, while they kind of work through this and get through this. He does not like not being here. I talked to him this afternoon. He did sound kind of rough. Like I said, just some fluid and stuff that's kind of gotten there, and they're trying to figure out what exactly is going on, and hopefully it'll get cleared up, and then maybe he'll be here. He is planning to be here Sunday, so and then all of you can pester him and go, what's wrong with you? You're supposed to be here. Say, you left us with Josh teaching. Say, something wrong with that. But no, he sent his lesson. I do want to take a moment and just kind of hit a couple announcements. If you are not on the Lightpost app, or you're going, what are you talking about, Lightpost? App on your phone, call Lightpost. I know probably a lot of you are, but that's kind of our new way of communicating with the congregation. It's got your emails in there. It's how we're going to be able to send out mass emails to everyone. Make sure you're on there. That also has a lot of our prayer list on there. You'll notice in the Sentinel each Sunday there is a small prayer list with kind of little tidbits in there with the name and hopefully a little information. But in Lightpost, there's actually more information, hopefully, on several of those that are on our prayer list. Yes, the directory is transitioning there as well to use. We have events on the calendar.
One of the nice features about the Lightpost directory is it's got that photo directory.
Yes, yeah.
You can find a photo and then
There's a lot of nice features to it that's going to allow us better communication as leaders with you, as the elders with all of us, as members. I know Trey has created a couple of discussion groups in there as well. I will also mention that for those of you who have been getting the emails and everything, you might have they might end up in your spam folder on occasion, because that did happen to several. This past Saturday with the Sentinel, it ended up in a lot of people's spam folder. So on Saturday, if you don't get your weekly email about the Sentinel, it's probably in your spam folder. So do check on that as well. If you need help with those things, you can talk with Randy, Keith, or Trey. They're kind of heading up and taking care of all the light post things.
Hey, Josh, I just wanted
yep.
to say, the elders talked about this, and on Sunday, if you don't have an app on your phone, have to go to the back of the line.
Oh, man. So we're going to send out an email via light post, that lets you know what number in line you go. Oh, sorry. No. But if you can't connect, and you don't actually even have to have it on your phone, it is accessible via the web as well. Like I said, it's a great communication tool to hopefully better our communication. And also in that vein, we have a number on our prayer list. I know Bill sent out today, Jan and Janelle, it was their brother-in-law?
Yes.
Yes, the brother-in-law.
Bob Bennett?
Yes, their brother-in-law is quite ill at the moment with, or did he, oh, I'm sorry, he passed away. Sorry, I'm getting my announcements mixed up now, so this is what happens when you don't put the announcements in front of you. But their granddaughter,
She's better.
Amelia is better now, is back to health and everything. I know we had her on the Sentinel list as well.
I have one to add.
Oh, another one to add? Okay, yes?
So Mason's fiance's uncle
Okay.
just passed away 2 days ago, and he
Oh.
was 55. And it's been really, really tough on the family. And he was particularly, he said, besides Kyla, his fiance, Greg was his favorite person in her family.
Oh, no.
And they talked every week. And so he's really been missing him too. Anyway, he'll be traveling back, so remember him in your prayers too for travel.
So that's Mason's fiance, Kyla. Her uncle passed away, if you didn't hear that. So he was about 55 years old. So, there's so many on our list. I mean, say. Okay.
Doing much better.
Carla is doing much better.
She very well could be here on Sunday.
Excellent. Say, I know there's a lot that we want to come off of that list so badly. But yeah, like I said, look at the light post, for prayer list updates and the like. I know Trey is trying to keep those up to date and things like that. One other mention is this Saturday, men, it is the men's breakfast this Saturday. So if you can be there, say, I see Bill scouring to make sure, so.
Chet live here?
No.
I hear he's bringing eggs from the chickens at his house.
Oh, Justin is bringing eggs from his chickens, so, all right. So we're going to have some good food. Sorry, ladies, but, but yes, if you can be here for the men's breakfast, I really encourage you to be there. It's a good time of fellowship. Like I said, I get to do the lesson tonight, but before we do that, why don't we go to the Lord in prayer? Our dear most heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day that you have blessed us with the beautiful weather and so much blessings that they're incountable, that we can not know them all of what you do for us. We would ask that you be with those who are sick at this time and unable to be part with us, and we ask that your healing hand be on them and so that they can rejoin with us. We, of course, are so thankful for everything that you do and for the sacrifice of your Son. We ask that you be with us now and be with us always. It's through your Son's name we pray. Amen. And I did also forget to mention our new minister technically starts Sunday. He won't preach on Sunday, but he does start. And Dad did tell me today he's going to teach next Wednesday. So we get to have Dylan here with us again. I know many of us I hope all of us are excited to have him join us, and look forward to the future. And yes, and the potluck is on Sunday, so morning service, potluck, devotional after that, so, and then the rest of the day you get to be, yourself. That didn't sound right, did it? Say, I hope you're always yourself. All right. I better start with the lesson. Let's see how much time could I waste there? So, we've been talking about little boy David. We've been talking about David. How the making of a king, has been the kind of the lesson here. We've talked about him facing Goliath. That was last week, wasn't it? It was Goliath. Yes. Goliath last week, and then the week before being anointed by Samuel, being selected by God. And of course now we're going to get into his time really with Saul. Basically we're coming to the end of Saul's reign in this. But beginning in chapter 18, really beginning in verse 9 here. So Paul eyed David from that day forward. Oops, make sure I'm on the right slide here. There we go. And it happened on the next day that the distressing spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied inside the house. So David played music with his hand, as at other times, but there was a spear in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the spear, for he said, I will pin David to the wall. But David escaped his presence twice. Now Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but he had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from his presence and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Therefore, when Saul saw that he behaved very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them. So what are some key observations, if you will? I shouldn't have put that up there yet. Some key observations that we're seeing about David here leading up to this point, if you will. Of course, we have, after Goliath's defeat, what is David's role? What's David's role in the kingdom? What is his view in front of the people? What the people have been saying, what? David slain his 10,000, Saul his thousands, David his 10,000s. David is becoming a national hero here. We love our national heroes. When we look back on our own American history, we have our national heroes, the people who fought for our freedom. John Wayne. Be careful now. But, we have these national heroes, and it's the same that's happening with Israel.
Do you think that Saul already knew that the kingdom was David? Because we can go back to the 15th chapter where Samuel tells him the kingdom's going to be taken away from you. And when he reached for his robe, he told him that your kingdom will be torn from you and will be given to one of your neighbors. So Saul already knew that his kingdom was lost.
Oh, yes.
And then, of course, before that, we have where, actually following that, where it says the evil spirit came into Saul. I don't believe anything evil comes from God. First of all,
absolutely.
God is over the living, the dead, and the spirit world. What this is a consequence of what Saul did in the 13th and 14th chapter where he had sinned against God.
Yeah, we have of course, Saul before this instance, he's been faithful to God early on, but what has happened is essentially pride has found its way into Saul's heart, because what does Saul do? What is he told? He goes off to battle and he's told, you got to kill them all, wipe them out. What does he do? He comes back with herds of cattle and livestock. He comes back with the king, and what happens? Samuel comes out to meet him and is like, wait a second here. And he's like, no, I did this all for God, And Samuel's like, no, you really didn't, This is not what you were told. And of course, Samuel delivers the news pretty quickly there that, sorry, this kingdom is no longer going to be yours. There's this divide that starts happening between Saul and God, actually, here. So yeah, I think that Saul is starting to feel by the chapter 18, Saul is really starting to feel that something is happening here. He's hearing, about David and all the good things he's doing. The people are just like, David's great, but oh no, So what happens, when you've got a national hero like that, and you're the leader of the people. What's happening? Jealousy, fear, especially hearing after these praises. Imagine for a second, here you are, you've been doing a lot of good things. You work hard for the church, But then someone else comes in and they do good things for church, and everyone starts praising them. And when you're over there going, well, wait a second, aren't I doing good too? Now, in truth, how should Saul be reacting? How should we react in that situation? It's a matter of humility, right? We should be humble in these things. It's wonderful that these things. If you go back to Proverbs, and when Solomon's writing, what does he say about, a wise king knows that someone's coming after. Someone's going to come after. And what does he say about that person coming after? They're not going to do it the same way. They're not going to be the same. So you've got Saul here going, wait a second, no, I'm the king. You're not the king. And it's not completely clear whether he knows that David is the one that's been selected by God at this point. It seems like that maybe comes into play a little bit later, but there's no direct, Samuel walks up to Saul and says, David's going to be next. Samuel just tells him, you're going to lose this kingdom. You're not going to have a successful kingdom here, with your family. Essentially, you think about what he's telling Saul is, Jonathan's not going to be the next king. He knows someone else is coming to replace him. Imagine how on guard he's going to be. Because what does he do here in chapter 18? What's one of the things he does? He takes that spear and he's going to pin David to the wall, as it says. He's out to kill David.
But it's funny that he became afraid of him, yet he sent him out with 1,000 men.
Oh, absolutely. I kind of look at that as he knows because it seems like this point in time where he takes the spear is a little more private time between him and David. It doesn't mention anyone else in the room with him. David's trying to please his king. He's trying to take care of his king, because what is David's thoughts on Saul? He loves Saul. He loves Jonathan. He recognizes that Saul was anointed by God, right? He knows that Saul's the guy in charge, and this is my kingdom, and I'm going to follow him. Even when he tries to kill him multiple times, he's still going to follow him. Popularity, though, is fleeting, and that's what's kind of happening here with Saul. Jesus rides into town to cheers and accolades, right? When he enters Jerusalem, what is everyone doing? He's riding on the donkey. Hosanna, Hosanna. They're laying the palm fronds and, making way. Oh, our king is coming, basically, is the way they're kind of reacting. But what happens just really by the end of the week, just days later, he is on the cross, right? You know, how fickle people can be in many ways. You know, David saves the king and the nation. He faces Goliath, right? You know, even Saul recognizes this, it appears, and brings him into his court. You know, there's a reason David is there to play his music for him. You know, it seems that Saul kind of liked David, but then the more praise that's coming along, well, no, I don't like this because I'm not getting what I used to. You know, and then, of course, now David then ends up being pursued and condemned by Saul. You know, he ends up hunted by Saul. So what takes a person from being a hero to being a fugitive? Make sure I'm on my right. What are some possible causes? What takes a person from being a hero to being a fugitive? What are some possible causes that could lead to this hero to fugitive? Saul is crazy. It does appear, you know, and we talk about, you know, the evil spirit that comes on Saul here, you know, and I've always found it interesting the way it phrases it about God and this evil spirit. You know, I've kind of always viewed it similar to the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, you know, or Satan's temptations of Christ, or even Satan's treatment of Job. You know, there's actually these things that it's more of, I'm going to, you know, God is saying, I'm going to allow this, because what's happening with Saul and God, there's a separation happening. You know, there are consequences to these actions that he has done, you know. And what is this? You know, arrogance. He's kind of been abusive of his power. He got arrogant. You know, what was he arrogant about? He modifies God's commands. He decided, well, I think I know something better. You know, how many people have you been around that they come in and they go, you need to do it my way, because my way is the better way. And it's like, well, you know, just because my way is the old way doesn't mean it's not a good way. You know, there's no compromise. There is, I think we need to do it my way. And in fact, when Samuel comes and confronts him, what does Samuel do? He takes the king and beheads him, right? You know, he's like, nope, we're going to do what God says to do. You know, when it comes to God, our way does not take precedent. You know, God's way always takes the precedence. And I think that's what we're trying to see here with Saul and David. I don't know what he was saying with... This is, by the way, Dad's PowerPoint. So I took his PowerPoint and notes and then created my own notes as well along with this. But basically, the next thing is he fails to grow and remain grounded. You know, it's that failure to continue, I guess. You know, it's failure to continue in God's ways. You know, it's, again, that I think I know how to accomplish this maybe a little bit better. You know, I think I can do it.
Well, Josh, if you go back to when Saul was first coronated, you know, he hid among the baggage, kind of like he was scared of being king. He was trying to hide from the fact. When you have people then who won't follow him or do what he wants to do, then it comes to the other things, he disobeys God. Then you come to, he's obviously scared to fight Goliath.
Mhm.
The entire nation is. And here comes this little runny kid out here. And he defeats him, and then they go back, and David is being hailed as a hero.
Yes.
And then I'm seeing fear,
Mhm.
disobedience. Now we've got, all of a sudden, as the first word comes up there, he's showing lots of arrogance.
Oh, yes.
So you have all that coming in to play there. And I think that people are starting to see a lot of things about Saul that they don't like.
Oh, absolutely. I think when you start seeing the cracks, you see someone, whether it's in power or in a, you start seeing these things as you are exposed to them more. You start seeing the faults in them. I don't know about you, but, I've been here at the congregation for 24 years. We're a perfect congregation. I mean, we have no faults whatsoever. Yeah, no, there are cracks. Now, what do you do with a crack? You patch it. You fix it. You repair it. You don't just widen it. You don't let it sit there untended. And it's arrogance to believe, no, this is perfect how it is. And that will lead us into the failure.
Part of that failure to continue, Saul kept changing his promises to David,
Mm-hmm.
especially with his daughters. He wanted him to do more.
Yeah.
And he wanted the Philistines to be the one to kill David.
Oh, yeah. You think about the relationship, that leads in with, Michal, Saul's daughter, and her getting kind of tossed around. She's promised to David, and then it's like, no. And then it's like, David's going, wait a second. I was about to say, and I believe it was both daughters, yes. This is the section of David's story that I'm not as strong in, definitely. So, I like David and Goliath. I mean, that's the story, man. Who wants to run from the king? Of course, Saul has jealousy that's built up in him. Slaying the 10,000, he's hearing the praise, this jealousy. But what is David doing this entire time? He's standing for what is true, right? He's standing for God. He is being respectful. As we come later on in the chapters, I believe there's 2 instances, if I remember correctly. It's like 24 and 26, I think. Okay. That, David has the opportunity to take Saul's life. And what does he do both times? He lets him live. In fact, he takes, the picture that's behind there, shows David supposedly with the cloth.
He realized that's God's anointed.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of the reasons that he didn't want to do anything to him because he was God's anointed. That's why David didn't want to fight with Saul.
Absolutely. He continued until the very end of 1 Samuel here. His view on Saul is very much honorific. He doesn't want to be at war with Saul. We'll call it a war with Saul. He doesn't want to be running from Saul. He loves Jonathan, Saul's son. He wanting to marry Saul's daughter. You're going, this is someone who really cared. He wants to honor God and what he has established, what God has established.
Yeah, I think he showed some humility in the idea that he was going to let God remove Saul from the throne and not his own hand that did that, because he had opportunity. I mean, he said,
Yeah.
we talked about it.
No, it's really interesting when you look, like I said, there's the two instances that we have recorded of where David could take Saul's life, and then what is it that takes Saul's life in the end? It's himself, his own self. And then you go into 2 Samuel when the messenger comes. What is David's reaction when he finds out this information? He is brokenhearted, exactly. This is someone he did love. It was his king. This is not someone he felt animosity really towards.
Well, and like I said, you're talking about that, he keeps referring to Saul as the Lord's anointed. Even though he's been anointed to be the next king, he still refers to Saul at least twice, I think 3 times, as the Lord's anointed. So he's looking up to Saul as a king and as who God wants to be the king.
So what qualities were well defined while David was fleeing from Saul? What are some qualities? I think there's a slide missing.
He tried to have confrontation with Saul. It's always, let me go hide over here, and then Saul keeps chasing him.
Absolutely.
Egging it on.
He is avoiding conflict as best he can throughout this. What's he doing? He's going and hiding in caves. He's avoiding the trouble as much as he can. In fact, we have the record of him going after Saul, like I said, getting into his camp. And what does he do? He's like, he could kill him right then. What's he do? He takes a piece of his garment. And then what's he doing? Going, see, look, I could have gotten you. He's trying to show Saul, it's okay. I'm not your enemy here. What is David thinking? There are other enemies out there, right? We've got the Philistines, the Amalekites are out there causing enough problems for Israel at this point.
David is also increasing his leadership abilities throughout this time. He's gathering men around him. They're acting as mercenaries. So he's developing the ability to lead men, which is something he's going to need to be able to lead the nation.
Yeah, there must be a slide missing here. So, what would you say is the primary mission of Saul versus the primary mission of David? So, Saul's mission originally when he became king, what was the mission here when he becomes king? Take care of the people of Israel. He didn't, like Dwayne was saying, he didn't necessarily have the desire to be king, but he took it on, but then as time goes on, he becomes more focused on himself and he loses sight of that mission, and instead, so God has to intervene and say, nope, guess what? You're not going to be king anymore, and you're going to get replaced by another one. Of course, Samuel goes, anoints David. David ends up, slaying Goliath, becoming popular among the people, becoming basically Saul's rival, without intentionally being it. But what is the contrast here? What is Saul's mission versus David's mission? Saul's out to kill David. But David, his mission is for the people, right? Is to follow God's will. What do we call David most often? Man after God's own heart. He's trying to do what he thinks is right by God. When it talks about, in 18, the evil spirit coming on Saul, what is David's reaction? He tries to soothe him, because Saul liked his music, it appears. And David's like, okay, I'm going to make this better. Of course, then, I don't know how you would feel, but I'd be pretty scared if suddenly the guy that I'm playing music for is throwing spears at me. So, and don't you think that God was in that, that spear missing, and he's like, okay, I'm out of here. I mean, if you were to compare Saul and David as kings, what kind of kings would you say they are?
David was loyal and honorable. Saul was loyal to an extent, but it seems sometimes he was more about himself than of what God wanted him to do.
Saul little more selfish. David a little less so. You know, Saul hardly ever turned back to God to say, oops, I messed up. What does David do every time? Turns back. And then when you realize at the end of their reigns, both of them were warrior kings. They were at war their entire kingships. You know, in fact, what does David do at the end of his kingship?
He couldn't build the plans that God had because he had blood, and it would be his son Solomon that would be able to do that.
Yeah. You know,
That's all the guy, that's all the needed to build it.
it's like it took all of that to build God's people's that nation, you know. Wasn't getting my words out there. No. Oh, okay. So, if we look at popularity, what does it take to become popular? You know, David did it by slaying a giant. What is it? Give the people what they want. Oh, maybe it's the perception of giving them what they want. Say.
It says here that he acted wisely before the people.
Oh, maybe it takes some wisdom. I think there are two kinds of popularity, really, when you get to it. There's good popularity and there's bad popularity. You know, does everyone know what a narcissist is? So my wife and I were talking about what it means to be a narcissist, and I wish I had the iceberg picture to put up here. But basically, on the surface, when you look at an iceberg, it seems small, right? You know, that would never sink a ship. You know, it's pleasant looking, it's pretty. You know, but what's down below? All the danger. All the dangers down below. This is the attitude of a narcissist, is I want to be popular. I want people to like me. But then when you're that popular, so, you know, and you can take this with Saul even here, is that he was a pretty popular king. You know, people were following him to war, you know, and then, but what starts happening? He's leading them down that wrong path that's not what God intends. Well, what happens when you get David? He's acting wisely. He's going out among the people, it even seems. You know, he's interacting with the people. He's behaving like he should, you know. And so people are like, we like this guy, you know. You know, he's short, but, you know, he's good looking, you know, but they're seeing the possibilities of a king in him, I think. So what does it take for any of us to become unpopular, though? One mistake. All it takes is one mistake. And suddenly, everyone turns on you. In today's culture, we have happenings across, especially it happens a lot among celebrities right now, is the popular people, is they make a mistake and what happens? They get canceled. You know, we call it cancel culture. You know, why? You make one mistake and now we're going to cast you aside.
I was gonna say, sometimes you become unpopular for doing the right thing.
Oh, absolutely.
The world and the culture doesn't like it, so.
Yes.
It doesn't always have to be a mistake.
Yeah, it does not always have to be a mistake that you make, but something that is indifference to what is popular. You know? Oh, politics. say.
You were using the example of Jesus a while ago.
Mhm.
Since when he came into Jerusalem that last week, he was very, very popular. But there was another crowd out there, which was the government.
Yes.
We can call them the elites. And they are the ones who
Oh, absolutely. You know, and what was he calling some of those people? You know, pit of vipers. You know, what happens when he goes to the temple? You know, yeah, whitewashed tombs. You know, what's that at the temple? You know, and he makes the rope that he starts whipping. Yeah. I don't know if he was actually whipping people or if he was whipping the cattle. I've read through that the other day, and I was like, wait, I don't know if he was actually striking people or if he was just, you know, what was turning over the tables? I think it was all the cows that he was smacking and sending the stampede through or something. But, yeah.
Look at it, you know, it's, you also wanna be next to the cow. If I can't be the cow, I wanna be near the cow. And down here on 24, after David said, hey, look what I did, I could've got, and he says, why do you listen to those people around you?
Yep.
When have I ever done anything to make you think I was gonna hurt you?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. You know,
That's right.
when you're in school, what table do you really want to sit at lunch? Not the mean girls. The one, well, that's the teachers, you know, you want to sit away from the kids, yes. But when you're in school, you know, you want to sit with the popular kids, right? The cool kids. You know, you want to be around the cool kids because when you're around the cool kids, what is the perception of you? You're cool too, say. Now, when you have a difference with the head cool kid, you know, what happens? Suddenly your popularity becomes fleeting. You know, you get outcast, you know, and you start being cast aside. So where do we find that we receive the most opposition or criticism from internal or external sources then? Where would you say? Oh, family. Family, oh yes, my family. I wonder if Dad's watching actually now. You know, family can be really tough. Family can be really tough. You know, and especially when you have a difference of opinion on things. You know, and you're like, Dad, this is not right. He goes, well, we just need to take the higher road. But Dad, you know, you're just going, Dad, you're not listening to me. Dad always listens to me, doesn't he, Mandy? Yeah. She does, you know. So. But, you know, there are those different opinions. Family is a great one, you know. Our church family. Say, there are nearly 200 members of this congregation, and every single one of them totally agrees with everyone. No, absolutely not. You know, what is it? The spice of life is variety, you know.
I would go as far to say also, the criticism you get from your loved ones
Mhm.
is oftentimes more personal and out of love a lot of times. Could
You
be
hope
out of
so.
frustration. But the people, you are gonna get criticism from people who don't even know you sometimes just because of a title you wear. Or a, you know, Christian
Just
teacher.
go on social media and post something on social media, and what are you going to find? Everyone has their own opinion on things, and they're going to let you know what they think, especially if they disagree. How many times do you go out there and you see a lot of positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement? It tends to be a lot more negative of, no, you're wrong. You need to listen to me. Because who do we always think is right? Me. I'm always right, aren't I, Carrie? Yeah, see. You know. Yeah. I still say I need a shirt that says I was always right. So how can we follow David's behavior then in development as we face the challenges of this life? I think that's the ultimate lesson we can learn from David, is turning to God, especially when we make mistakes when we're struggling with something. You know, David was not the perfect king by any means. But what does he do every single time? You know, we have nearly 200 Psalms, you know, and most of them are David going, please forgive me, I messed up. So, like I said, next week, Dylan will be here. And he will get to start the class. And I know we're all excited for that. And I hope that all of you are going to welcome him with me. So thank you all so much this evening.